Good evening, everybody. Welcome to You Get What You Get. I'm Rickey Hampton, along with my partners in crime here tonight, Miss Tree McDougal and Tim Turner, coming to you on a Tuesday evening. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's had a fantastic day. Uh, I hope you'll pull away from the basketball game for a few minutes and take these next few minutes to chat with us. Send us your questions and comments, especially since we have a NBA legend on with us tonight, Mr. Ray Scott, uh, former player with the Detroit Pistons and Baltimore Bullets, uh, first black man to win the NBA's coveted Coach of the Year award. But Ray, I'm telling you that Coach of the Year award is becoming a bad luck piece for
It's
cats
not,
now.
it's not something that stabilizes your importance to the league. Um,
Really?
Monty was just the coach of
Yeah.
Phoenix. He was just coach of the year 2 years ago, much like my situation. The problem, I believe, when you look at that, because fans say, "Why would you do that if this man has been selected?" But what happens so often is the sales of teams. And with the sales of teams, the owners want their guy. It's a socialization, I believe. And I believe that, Ishbia, the new owner, the Michigan State kid that's the new owner of
The
Phoenix.
Suns. Yeah.
he was a player at Michigan State. Now, is there something at work? Is he looking to get Izzo? Is he looking to get an Izzo clone? Because that was his favorite coach in college. He said this coach helped him become a billionaire. So, is there something there? Is he listening to Mateen Cleaves, who works for him? Is he listening to Charlie Brown, who was a player of that
Charlie,
championship?
Charlie Bell. Charlie
Charlie
Bell.
Bell, such as Charlie Bell. Charlie Bell, who was a great player on that team. I always say, and I found it out in coaching, and Rick, I've talked to you about this ad nauseum. It's the people behind the scenes that go against you when you seem to hit a bump in the road. And I believe that these owners have these guys that are quote unquote advisors that are saying, well, so and so could have won this game, or so and so could have won that game. With me, it was Dick Vitale. He was the guy that they always talked about in Detroit. Well, he should be coaching the Pistons. And I don't know why he was coaching at college and he was doing a great job. I certainly wasn't saying I should be coaching at University of Detroit, but that seemed to be the relationship that he had with Bob Lanier, and that was often what was whispered. So the first time that we got into a little trouble, a little deep water, I was out.
Yeah.
I was out, and somebody said, "Well, he was just coach of the year. How can he become so bad in 1 year, and that you don't even roll with him and see if he can pull it out?" There's no pull it out in basketball. They once they want to make the move, and they're owners, they make the move, and I find that it's starting to. I don't say it's alarming, but it makes you wonder because Nick Nurse was coach of the year. Nick Nurse was a championship coach. Um,
Doc Rivers, former
Doc,
coach of the year.
I mean, and Doc has been exemplary and how he protects the NBA and promotes the NBA and helps his team he helped teams become better teams and with the Clippers and with Philadelphia. So, Red Auerbach didn't win championships right out of the
Okay.
gate. Yeah, he didn't. It takes time to build your guys. Look at Denver. Denver's built this team. This team is not just overnight couple of trades and a couple of drafts. This team is built, purposely built. So I don't know. There's something there that I'm not seeing. But you're so well compensated today. You know, coaches are making $5-10 million a year. So you're so well compensated. I don't know whether that's it, but I do believe it comes down to promotion and marketing and the people behind your back that are constantly talking to the owner, saying you should have this guy at the cocktail parties. You should have this guy as your right hand man. You should, and I do believe that. I do believe.
Hey Tim, Dick Vitale was a pretty good coach at the University of Detroit. He had Spencer Haywood averaging 30 and 20 a game.
That wasn't Dick. That wasn't Dick. That was Jim Harden. Dick was John Long and Terry Tyler.
Oh, he didn't have Spencer?
No, that was Jim Harden.
Okay, my bad on that. Bad on that.
He was supposed to. The deal was he was supposed to go to U of D with Will Robinson, and Will Robinson didn't get the job, but he did get the job over in Illinois.
Illinois State. Yeah.
Yeah, he coached Dougie Collins.
But Ray, you were saying you were talking about how it takes time to build a team, but I think that it seems like we live in an age of everybody wants everything immediately. So I guess to your point, they want coaches to come in with just winning right off the bat, right?
Right. I had a philosophy from having played professional ball for 11 years, and then they made me a coach. My philosophy was, if I have a number one draft pick, and there's a guy in the league I can get with that number one draft pick, I traded. I got George Trapp. I got Kevin Porter. I got Archie Clark for number one picks. Because what happens, you get a number one pick, and at the time that, I guarantee it, the time that number one pick becomes an all-star, you're not the one coaching. Yeah. So if I'm going to coach somebody, it's going to be a guy I know that can give me the best I can get with immediate results. So that's a great point. But that was the way I felt.
Yeah, I think people are just impatient.
I think it's a lot like that today. But Tim Wimbiana is supposed to be this guy, 7'4", 7'5".
I saw a picture online yesterday of him standing next to Rudy Gobert.
Oh my God!
And Rudy Gobert is 7'1", and that kid was a full head above Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
So he's gonna eat up some space. I mean, vertically he's gonna eat up space. Horizontally, he's about as wide as a pencil. But he's gonna get in people's way. He's gonna be a handful. And then Pop is the right person to coach him. It was also, I saw a photo of him, I think today, of him wearing a Tony Parker jersey.
Yes.
So
yes,
it comes pretty much full circle that he's already a Spurs fan growing up, and I understand that a lot of the Houston Rockets made note of his expression when it was down to the Spurs and the Rockets, and the Rockets got the second pick, and his look of relief. And the Rockets saw that, and they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna remember that when the season starts. That you didn't want to come play with us." So it's gonna be interesting to see what's going on with that kid.
Well, the only player that I saw of the stature to come into the league, well, actually, was two: Kareem and Wilt Chamberlain. That were just page turners. Kareem in Milwaukee and Wilt in Philadelphia. They made their teams super teams coming out of college. This kid may have that type of ability, but remember, we've never seen him play. Like, we did get to see those individuals play prior to them coming to the NBA, so we knew they were page turners.
So you don't put any stock in any of that video that you see? You don't put stock in that? Because it's just like when Luka, I saw a lot of video of him and never saw him actually play a game. They show the best of the highlights.
Right.
I thought for sure that he was going to be an instant hit in the NBA, and he was.
I think yeah, those guys, the Europeans, because there's so much footage, there's so much film, you do get the opportunity to see a lot of the European players. But I don't think anyone thought that, for instance, Jokic was going to be as good as he was.
Yes.
He was incredibly out of shape. He was a chunker. Look at him now; he doesn't even look like the same guy. He looks like the model for the NBA player now. Lean and keen and fast. I had no idea that he handled the ball as well as he does, nor did I think that he would have that athleticism and speed that he has. But Luka, what is the kids from back, Drazen Petrovic, and all those guys, they're super players because that's all they do every day over there is they train. They're doing what the American kids used to do. That's what they bring to the table now. They work, and work on their skill level. And Tony Kukoc was the first, but he certainly has not been the last. So that's been interesting. But I think that became viable because they wanted to change the color or the texture of the NBA with some European players. And I think developed those players intentionally to come to the NBA.
Would you have picked Embiid as your MVP? I mean, after seeing what Jokic is doing, had done to the Lakers, and in the playoffs period, I'm like, he played that way the entire season. I'm like, man, it seemed like nobody wanted him to three-peat, but that guy he's amazing.
He's amazing. He's an amazing player. He's got all of the concept for the game. Whoever trained him, they trained him in every area of basketball. His vision is incredible. Last night's game, he had 13 assists.
Right.
As a center out on the floor, not playing in the post and getting doubled and passing out, because he was effective no matter where he was on the floor. But the people that developed his skills, I'd like to get a feed on who they are, because he clearly is the best center in the game. Clearly. And he's so great for the skilled guys that he has around him. He makes their skills better. But saying, no, I think Embiid has been cheated, I think, in some way out of the most valuable player. And the thing with Embiid, and I always say this, he's foreign too. He's African. He's not from South Philly or California or Chicago. He was trained overseas too. So I think the people that are getting these kids, these tall soccer players, and converting them to basketball players, they're doing ever since Hakeem Olajuwon. They've just been doing an incredible job training these players overseas.
What were your thoughts, Ray, on Denver sweeping LA, and really just they had an easy time going through the West?
They were clearly the better team. There's no argument. There's no, first of all, if your best player is a 20-year veteran, you got a problem. And because you're always living, you got one foot on a banana peel and the other one off the curb, because this guy is almost 40 years old, and that's your best player. And I said, no, he shouldn't be the best player. The best player should be Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And with that not happening, I said it's the age-old thing that they know in the NBA. Take those legs away. Wear them down. I watched them do it with Clay, and with Curry. And I love both those kids. But they couldn't shoot a jump shot from 15 feet and hit the rim near the end of the season because they just lost their legs. You know, there is Father Time does exist for all of us.
Yeah.
Well, they were talking about, because LeBron had a great first half, but there was not a whole lot left in the tank in the second half. And that drive at the end of the game, it was like, come on, man. Pass the ball out to somebody. I was looking at Anthony Davis. It's always good, hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
Anthony Davis, there's nobody on him out there near the free throw line.
Right.
But LeBron was going to try to make the play.
Right. There's no lift. He has no lift.
Right.
That's what I was talking about that today. If you look at the game last night, it was just a question of watching that lift come down. And the young guys over there in Denver, they never lost their lift. Porter, the other kid that played really good.
CP, Bill, Bruce Brown.
Yeah, they just had lift all the time. And that's called youth, my friends.
Yeah.
It's called youth.
True.
Yeah, I was, after the game, and there was the press conference where LeBron came out and talked about retirement, and that's all I've heard about today was, is he going to retire? Didn't hear as much about the Nuggets winning. It's all I heard all day, every time I watched the sports station was LeBron. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we're a league that's superstar driven. So what the superstar does at that time, what impact they have on the game, that's going to come into question. As they've questioned the two kids in Boston, Tatum and Brown. Because we're superstar driven, whatever they do, whether they blew their nose, whether they, hurt their hand, whether they got hit in the face, that's where the cameras are. But the game was clearly lost, in my opinion, for LeBron and Anthony. The game was clearly lost in that their bench never got deeper. It got smaller and smaller and smaller to where you were depending on LeBron or Davis to make a play. I don't think we can name another guy other than Reeves to some degree, but we didn't have another player that was impactful in the game last night. And I always say you need a third or fourth, and that's where Denver is so good.
Yeah,
they got the third, fourth, fifth guy.
I think Schroeder was trying to get in there. Schroeder.
Yes. Yeah, he's a scrappy player, but he's limited. He missed 3 threes down the stretch. He should have missed because he was wide open.
Because there's at one point they were like 0 for 7 on threes, and in the second half or whatever it is, they had not hit a 3 in the second half. And so they were just heaving up prayers, essentially.
Yeah, Russell was terrible.
Yeah, he started out really strong in the series, but he stank it up toward the end.
Yeah, he was he against the teams early on against Memphis. He showed well, but it's hard to sustain that energy and that leverage game after game after game when it is needed. That's a hard, I loved what the guy you spoke about, Tree, the guard, Schrader. I love what he was doing. He gave everything he had, but you saw him lose more and more and more out of his legs because what happens, your jump shot falls. You can literally see it when it leaves his hand. That's what I said about PJ, the kid in Tucker. He used to make threes from the side. He could literally close his eyes and shoot the ball from the side of the court and make a three. He had his legs. He has no legs now. Yeah. And you see it as soon as he shoots the ball, you know that it's not going. And that's, it's just a coaching eye, but you start watching that. You start tracking the ball, whether he has his legs underneath him, whether he's shooting a jump shot or a push shot. Now, the guy that shoots the push shot is the guy in Boston, the center forward. He shoots a push shot.
Right.
Now, but he depends on his legs.
Mm.
There's a reason he's not making those jump shots, and it just comes down to all of that conditioning is just taken away from you. It's a fast game out there. And if you remember, that's Steve Kerr's philosophy: run, run, run.
Now, what do you think of the coaching job of McDougal in Boston? Because I was made a comment not too long ago that it's one thing to be cool under pressure when things are like going crazy around you, because he really remained emotionless. He looked like, to me at some point that he was a cat that had a look on his face as if he was wondering whether or not he left the stove on at home, because he just, he was just kind of looking to the side and kind of gathered himself. He never changed expression, and they were getting drilled. When they got up by 30, he never changed expression.
Right. And Timmy, that's because he's a coach who knows what he has. And he won games because he had those two kids. And so he's just waiting for them to turn it on. Meanwhile, Eric Spoelstra is pushing all the buttons, with the guys coming in off the bench, guys we don't even know. He's got 9 guys that were not even drafted. But he's put a system together, and he's had that time to do that. Pat Riley let him do that. I mean, they obviously worked in tandem, and they're unbelievable. I was with them for a book signing on March 19th, and the game was Miami against the Pistons. And having seen Miami, I never saw this coming. I would have bet you money that these guys would be lucky to get out of the play-in. That was my with Miami.
And they lost their first game.
They lost to Atlanta the first game.
They lost to Atlanta.
That's correct. I would never even bet on that transpiring. But all of a sudden, all these guys, you lose 2 guys. You lose Oladipo. You've already lost Hero. You lost Hero and Oladipo. You lost 2 big players in your system. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking at 42 making plays. Kevin Love. I'm looking at 3 guys I don't even know making plays. Martin and Robinson had sunk so far on the bench, we never even saw him. We never even saw Robinson again after the midseason.
Well, you mentioned those cats that you haven't heard of, and most of the world hasn't heard of them.
Uh-huh.
But do you think I mean, I just think it's fascinating to mention that 8, 9 guys were undrafted, and they're really running away with all these guys who are high draft picks. But Draymond Green chimed in thinking saying it was disrespectful for the TNT crew to keep bringing it up. I think that it's a badge of,
it's a compliment.
Highlight it.
Yeah,
it gives hope to a lot of these kids out there who think they have to be drafted in the NBA to be successful in the NBA.
Exactly.
Right. No, you just have everybody plays the game, but it's who you play it with. And what I've seen, and Eric is an excellent coach. Now, and I'll tell you one thing that he's done, Bolster has done, that should blow us all away, and we don't think about it. His starting point guard was Kyle Lowry. He's taking Kyle Lowry, and he has him running his second group. But he plays extended minutes, so his excellence that he has with the second group spills over to the first group. And you'll see Kyle Lowry, and you go like, I can't believe I'm seeing what I'm seeing. But that was just a slight adjustment. And so now the other kid that's playing the point guard, the backup point guard. He's played his way into being an excellent player. But he can do that because they have Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler knows how to control the ball, and he knows how to look at the placement on the floor that they play, that they do so well. That's why they can drive to the basket so extraordinarily well, because they have those lanes. But that's because they have those 3-point shoots.
Hey, hey, what's happening, Jared? Thanks for tuning in, man. And Jared has a very interesting point. He says the Boston coach, McDougal, seems overwhelmed. I think this series would be closer if Udoka had been on the bench.
Well, that's speculation.
Yeah, he's not. So
guys have to play. I mean, once you get to the court, your guys have to play. And if they play and they're not productive, and I want to say this to our guests, if the guys are not productive, then yes, we all are going to have curious looks on our faces as coaches. That's nothing. That's Missoula has done all he can do to this point. There's no magic. You have the personnel you have, and you have the system you have, and so you're looking to continue doing what you've been doing. You see very few teams that go into these playoffs that change, in my opinion, that change their personality and change it.
So if you got a guy, Ray, who's played well for you during the regular season, and he's struggling in the playoffs, how far do you ride him?
Well, then look how far they're riding Horford. Now now, for instance, today they're trying to play. The Boston is trying to play Williams as a backup to the shooting from the corner that Horford was responsible for. So you try to plug guys in, but your system is your system. You can't. It's hard to go into that practice and change your whole thought processes in what you do. So I think Missoula has really done his job, but the players have to execute. That's how I feel. The guys have to go on the floor and execute. And if they don't buy in and they don't do it, then you got a problem. Yeah. You'll be sitting over there next to all these coaches that got fired next year.
I pretty much think he's going to be
fire the team, Tim. Huh? They can't fire the whole team, so they fire the coach.
Well, that's true, but the whole team isn't screwing up. It's just the guys who are the big money guys aren't giving him anything in the stretch. Tatum has been awful in the fourth quarter in these last couple of games.
And see, they're not talking about the defense,
right?
That's being played on Tatum. They found guys that can guard Tatum. At one stretch of this season, I thought Tatum was unguardable.
Yeah,
I thought he was unguardable. I was like, man, nobody can guard him. And then the other guy, it takes two guys to guard him. To guard
Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, Smart playing well and White's playing well, and they had a nice system for them. But it's a funny thing when your jump shot falls short. It's rough. It's rough. It is.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what you look at, every year when these guys make a run, Tree, is Jimmy Butler just doing Jimmy Butler things in the playoffs.
Yeah. I'm starting to like him a lot. It's just, I guess I just kind of respect how he's playing. And when, they poked him at the last game.
Yeah.
And he was just on fire.
If I'd had a baseball bat and I was a coach, it would have been upside his head.
Grant Williams.
That's the wrong guy. Of all the guys that you get into it, knows Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler's been a tough guy ever since he was in Chicago. We made a big mistake in Philadelphia letting that guy go.
Yeah, they put all their money on. Was it Tony? Was that the guy?
Tobias.
Tobias. Yeah.
Who's a good player, but he's not Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, but he's no Jimmy Butler.
Yeah,
True.
But the guy I think that has struggled mightily for Boston has been Jaylen Brown.
They play good defense on. It seems like they said keep Jaylen Brown in front of him, and they build that wall when he tries to drive to the basket, like they do with Giannis. And that's a tough shot when you have three people converging on you when you go to the basket, as we found out last night with LeBron. You try to build a wall. And coaches are coaching that better now to impact what these guys can do individually. And so what bails a lot of these great players out is that they're able to shoot the 3-pointer. But if they're not making that 3-pointer like Terry, then they don't get those driving lanes.
Well, Ray, how do you see this? I'm assuming, regardless of what happens tonight, Miami's going to eventually advance to the finals, and they will see the Denver Nuggets. How do you like that series playing out?
It's going to be interesting because it's going to be the athleticism of Bam Adebayo versus the basketball skills of the big man, of Joker. However, I'm a great believer in something that Shaq came up with, and we used to talk about it. Shaq said, if your good players play great or good, it's going to be up to the others to make it. And I agree with Shaq wholeheartedly. Red Auerbach was a firm believer in that. The six-man concept with Frank Ramsey, John Havlicek, Larry Siegfried. He always believed in the six-man concept. Build your bench deep. And I think it's going to come down to the guys that we haven't seen before that comes out of those 9 players with Miami. And I believe it's going to come down to the 2 forwards and Bruce Brown with Denver. That's going to be the key guys, in my opinion, when I look at their team. Because the other guys are high performance guys.
Yeah.
Murray and Joker, they're high octane. They're high octane.
They're going to get here. They're going to get there. Tim, you're on mute. You're on mute, Tim.
Marceau.
We don't
talking about a deep bench. The bench is deep.
We went way back.
Really, Denver is only playing 7 players.
Yeah,
they're not playing to everybody. I mean, so that's like the old school in itself, that they're not. They got a couple of guys off the bench that are making contributions as opposed to, going any deeper than that. I think the Lakers tried to throw everybody at them at the kitchen sink because they changed up their starting lineup again the other night.
Right.
And I think Spo, he's a guy that believes in sharing it with everybody.
Right.
That's been successful with him, and the Celtics really haven't gone too deep in their bench.
Right.
Do you guys think Mazzulla will lose his job if they get swept?
He's gone.
You think he's going, Jimmy?
Oh yeah. And then it would be weird to see Brad Stevens come off the front office and go back to the bench.
Yeah. That could happen. Because he's relatively a young guy. So he certainly, whoever runs that team certainly could say that that's a move we should be looking at, or that's a move we should make with respect to running the team and what our basic philosophy is. Yeah, that's a good point. I like that.
Hey, Ray, we also want to get your thoughts on the passing of a sports icon, a cultural icon, the great Jimmy Brown. But before we get into it, I just want to play this little snippet right quick.
Jim Brown will always be. There are few athletes who have left their mark on society like Jim Brown. An all-encompassing star, Jim burst onto the scene as a multi-sport standout at Syracuse in the 1950s, excelling in basketball and track while becoming an All-American in both football and lacrosse. Jim was inducted into the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame in 1983, the first African-American to receive such an honor. But he became a legend on the gridiron. Brown was drafted 6th overall by the Cleveland Browns in 1957 and immediately was a star. Rushing for an NFL record 237 yards in just the 9th game of his rookie season, he went on to be named the league's most valuable player. The next year, Jim broke the single-season rushing record by nearly 400 yards with a remarkable 1,527 yards in rushing in only a 12-game season, winning another MVP. He would go on to play some 9 seasons, continuing to stamp his name across the NFL record book. Jim retired after the 1965 season when he won his 3rd and final most valuable player award, holding both the single-season rushing record, 1,860 yards in 1963, and the career mark with more than 12,000 yards, the first running back ever to eclipse the 10,000-yard mark. Jim was named to the Pro Bowl in each of his 9 seasons while leading the league in rushing a record 8 times, and he remains the only player in league history to average more than 100 yards rushing per game. He was enshrined into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1971. But Jim was much more than a football player. He was an accomplished actor with credits in dozens of films, including box office hits like The Dirty Dozen and Ice Station Zebra. But his lasting impact just may have been through his civic work. Brown was a major figure in the civil rights movement, and his support of Muhammad Ali, who refused his draft induction during the war in Vietnam, led to an iconic summit in 1967 alongside Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and other top African-American athletes. There, Brown forged a very special bond with Ali. Brown would continue his work, founding the Amir I Can program in 1988 to help gang members and prison inmates to learn life management skills and personal growth techniques. A civil rights champion, a world-class athlete, Jim Brown will always be remembered for the mark he left on the sports world and society as a whole.
Ray, we had you on the other day with Mike Robertson and on our show talking about Jim. He was a contemporary of yours during the 60s when you were doing your thing in the National Basketball Association. He was doing his thing in NFL. Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, the black athlete was exploding on the scene in our country. Wilt, Oscar, Bill Russell. Help us put all that into context.
It's a beautiful context because it's from the tale of the advancement of the African American to sports elite, to the sports elite status. It started with the 4 guys. Actually, it started with Jackie Robinson. Let's be honest. It started with Jackie Robinson, and before Jackie, it started with Joe Louis and Sugar Ray Robinson. So that elitism was being born in the 20s with the great writer Grant and Rice, as he started to look at the exploits of African Americans in sports and how people, appreciated it, particularly the press. When it came down to Jim Brown, because before Jim Brown, there was a running back by the name of Marion Motley, who played with the Cleveland Browns, and he was a championship fullback. And so Marion Motley, who played with the great quarterback Otto Graham and Dante Lavelli and Max Speedy and those guys, they had a great team. But Art Modell had that team set up for Jim Brown when he came out of, and they talked about it a little bit in the piece you just ran, how great a player he was at Syracuse. Because Syracuse was not a football power. It was a communications school. And yet they were a little bit more subtle because they did the lacrosse, the rugby, the sports that we don't think about much. And Jim excelled in those sports, track and field, and so forth. But when Jim hit, he really hit in 1956, the same year that the New York Giants in Baltimore hooked up. But Jim played against Rice University, and they had an All-American by the name of Dickie Mangle. He was a tailback. He was a wide receiver. He was a multi-purpose guy. Jim takes his Syracuse team down to Texas to play in the Cotton Bowl. And the score is 28-27. And all 27 points for Syracuse were scored by Jim Brown. That was when we as kids got to look at him, because I was an East Coaster. So I got to see Jim Brown, and man, we marveled. And what he personified for all of us as we are connected in our spirits, he personified strength. He personified strength, integrity. He was direct. He was analytical. He was a multifaceted guy. And he only played professional football 9 years.
Yeah.
And we still talk about his methods. He still has emblazoned across NFL football his mark. And so, consequently, we never saw anybody like him. And we thought for a little bit that the better football player might have been Bobby Mitchell. He wasn't, but we thought he could have been. He might have been. But Jim Brown, and when he emblazoned what he did across a broad spectrum, by not only having this width, this 6'2", 228 pounds, but this brain. And when economically he tried to move us as a people, he worked diligently to move us as a people into the forefront in the 60s as a culture. The courage of those guys to do that, the Medgar Evers, the Dr. Kings, the Malcolm X, these guys, they had targets placed on them. And yet they stood that test. And Jim stood that test for 87 years. Never backed off. I think we were all disturbed when we saw him sitting with Donald Trump. I know I was deeply disturbed. But then I said, I got to do some investigation here. And what I found out upon investigating, he was there to get the money for his programs. That his programs were run through the federal government. So he had to.
American.
I'm sorry?
American.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's the federal program.
And Tree, he definitely gets deference, and it definitely gets a pass from me because of some of the things Ray talked about in terms of dealing with Donald Trump, because of his good works for all those years. Because I am old enough to remember this guy as a kid, and I remember Ali with his the way he made me feel proud.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim was the same thing, the way he made me feel proud as a young black man, a young black boy in Nashville, Tennessee. I can never forget that for anything else that might have gone on. I can never forget those things about Jim Brown. What thoughts, Tree?
Yeah, I think that, I understand he has some other things that happened in his life, maybe involved with, domestic violence or something like that. But I think we always want our heroes to be perfect, or you have this this image of what you want them to be. But you really never know what people are going through. And I don't know how he grew up. I don't, the backstory. We don't know his private life that led to that. But I think it's important to hold on to that piece that you remember growing up, because those are your memories. And as he was your hero, if that was if that's true,
Mm-hmm.
then, it's kind of hard to separate those two probably from one another. What do you say, Tim?
I think you're all making great points, and Tree is grinning
I
because
think I know what you're going to say.
sets me up. And I don't. It's like fine and dandy. He was there for the American, but the idea that he was even in Trump Tower just grates me.
Yeah.
And it seemed like in his later years, Jim Brown wasn't the same Jim Brown he was when he was the dyed-in-the-wool activist. And that's the thing that disturbed me disturbed me more than anything else. I saw everything else that he did. He probably is, and I had a conversation about with my wife today, and she made me admit that he was the greatest football player that ever played. I said, yes, he probably was, but he dangled a woman over a balcony. But he met with Donald Trump. But he punched a guy at a guy playing golf. I mean, and Tree was talking about wanting the heroes to be perfect. I don't want you to be perfect. I just don't want to see headlines like that.
Here's the thing, though, Tree. If somebody would write the headlines of all the bad things I did in my life, I would seem just as despicable. Hey, ask my first wife.
We don't talk about that here. Yeah. Maybe we talk about that later.
You
don't want to incriminate yourself anymore.
I get where you're coming from. He by no means is he perfect, and I certainly didn't like him dealing with Donald Trump, regardless. But man, you have to take. He gets deference because I'm not going to put away 30 good years of good work.
No,
you can't. But I feel where you're coming from on that.
But at the same time, too, I hear exactly what you're saying, because I'm looking at the cats now who could have stood up for causes and still filled their coffers.
Right.
People that Republicans buy shoes too, Jordan. And a lot of these other things. I mean, the WNBA had to take the forefront of the summer of 2020. It wasn't the NBA players that led the charge of sitting out games. The Milwaukee Bucks finally decided. They looked over the WNBA and said, "We're not playing." And then it cascaded to where other sports people were saying, "We're not playing," behind the George Floyd thing. It's not these kids took the initiative to do it themselves. Whereas back in that day, when people actually had their lives threatened, actually had the specter of death over them, to call that summit to back Muhammad Ali. Jim Brown called that summit. You see Bill Russell sitting up there, who got an honorary degree from Morehouse on Sunday, posthumously. You see, Kareem Luell-Cinder sitting up there. You saw the guys from the Packers. I'm thinking his name is
Willie Davis.
Willie Davis. That's what I'm saying. You see that these are guys who were stars and in their prime who risked that. Where you got guys here, probably getting something from their agent or their marketing team, and they're sitting back there like, that's not my cause.
I want to go to Ray on this. Ray, what is the responsibility of other athletes? I know you were on the line. I've seen pictures of you serving as a bodyguard for Dr. King's wife, Coretta. I mean, as a professional athlete with that platform, how do you feel that responsibility?
That's a great question. You feel it because you want to live your life with integrity. And so I remember, I always have talked about it. It's in my book. I talked about Emmett Till. I was 16 years old when he was murdered. He was 14. That has a lasting impact. I'm 84 years old today, and I can remember that like it was yesterday. Because that said to me, this is what can happen to you in America, John Raymond. Get your stuff together. Keep your eyes open. In 1961, when I was drafted, in 1960, we had just elected the first Catholic president in this country, John Fitzgerald. And he said, I want to open up new frontiers, and I want to include our Negro brethren in this march to justice. And I remembered that because I was 22 years old, I was a kid, 22 years old, going into the NBA. And my observations that I was making were being made by a kid from an inner city of South Philly, and I was making these observations with money in my pocket. That was unbelievable as I researched that and said, I could look at life. I'm so fortunate. I'm so blessed by what Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby and Jim Brown and Bobby Mitchell and these guys are doing. This is when we had no black quarterbacks. We had no black interior linemen because the preposition was we were too stupid to play those positions. And we just broke those doors down step by step by step through the 60s and the 70s. And so for me, that meant so much because I was just exposed to Malcolm. I was exposed to Bobby Seale. I was exposed to these guys that were standing in the face of fire, and I'm playing a game. I'm observing this from playing a game and from getting a couple of bucks in my pocket. And that meant so much to me. At that time, at 22, 25, 30 years old, I got a nice car. I got a nice apartment. I had all these things. I could take care of my family. It meant a lot that these guys made, they were the shining house on the hill. And I never forget. And Timmy, this is for you. Jackie Robinson was a Republican. Wilt Chamberlain was a Republican. Sammy Davis was a Republican. They embraced Richard Nixon. But
Literally.
Sammy gave him a
literally embracing it.
And I remember those times. But what I learned, I looked deeper than the gesture. I looked deeper than the literal sense. Richard Wright taught me that. James Baldwin taught me that. When we look at a man, let's really look at the man. And so when you say that, yes, I don't, seeing Jim Brown in Trump Tower was awful. But like I said, to the extent that I said, why? And the why is he was getting money. That's where he went to get the money for this program. And Trump was smart enough to play that. He's a master manipulator. He's not just a manipulator. He is a master. And he has a think tank of people saying, Mr. President, if we do this, if we need a black person on stage holding up a sign that says, Blacks for Trump. I don't know how many times we've seen it.
Same here.
Poor man that they must fly him around the world. Every time somebody's holding up that sign,
his name must be Blacks.
It's that same guy.
Blacks here for Trump. No. Okay, so all right, Ray. So Jim Brown is no longer dead to me, but Steve Harvey and Kanye are. Okay.
Well, and you know why? Because they're pronounced. Jim Brown was not pronounced in any support for Donald Trump. Kanye and Steve Martin were, but that's because
Steve Harvey
to be in the short line. Yeah. I'm an old man. I know the guys look over there and say, "Where's the short line and where's the long line?" If I look at the Democrats, I'm looking at the long line. There's a whole lot of brothers of the Democrats that are out here getting. I just watched the brother the other day with this Marjorie Taylor Greene. They told me and what I saw was two different things. This brother killed her.
Yeah.
He told her off in a gentlemanly fashion. As a man, as a black man, he didn't threaten her. She lied.
And of course, she a woman who harasses a survivor of the Parkland shooting, following him down the street, complains about that. I digress, though. Go ahead, Tim.
I want to go back to a football thing. You think about, you said he was drafted. I mean, I listened to the clip. He was drafted 6th in the draft. And you're thinking about the GMs in the front office of those first 5 teams and what they were thinking. From what I understand, at number 5, they lost a coin flip with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Browns owner wanted to draft Lynn Dawson. But the Steelers took Lynn Dawson at 5, and they had to draft Jim Brown.
Right.
And didn't even keep Lynn Dawson around.
No, because he went to the AFL.
Yeah.
And went to the Chiefs.
Yeah, they didn't offer him money to bring him in
Right.
to the NFL. That's correct.
Yeah. Hey, there's so many other topics we could get into, but we're at the witching hour. I do want to. I think we should mention right quick the firing of Dwayne Kuiper from the broadcast.
Oh, you mean the gentleman that went to the Negro League?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, he didn't go to the Negro League museum. That's not what I heard. That's not what I heard at all.
Nobody heard that.
We heard it. We heard it.
I got the clip. I don't even need to play the clip because we know.
Yeah.
We know, Ray. You experienced it on the road as a coach.
Yeah.
I'm sure as a black coach.
Yeah.
Not only as a player, but as a black coach.
Yeah. Go to St. Louis, buddy. That's where you hear it right from the stands. That's from St. Louis to Atlanta.
That's interesting that you would say that, Ray. That is really. I have a story for St. Louis.
Okay.
I was leaving the ballpark. I was watching the Cardinals play the Royals, and just walking back to my hotel, maybe like 3 blocks away, and on this parking garage, on top of the parking garage, because people could look inside the stadium there beyond center field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking toward my hotel, and I hear this two words. A nigger. I was like, that right there was St. Louis for me.
Yeah.
Just walking the street, walking the hotel, minding my own business. Yeah. I was there on business, and I had the company I worked for. I was wearing their gear. Otherwise, I'd have gone up to the top of that parking garage, and I'd ask them who they were talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And we may never have seen you again.
Probably not.
It's
a little plaque on the spot where they took me out, but that was I will never forget St. Louis behind that when you said that.
I played against the Hawks. Checked out my chapter on Cleo Hill, but the Hawks, and I have to tell the true story of the Hawks. They in this chapter in this book, Rick, they said. We were a racist organization, and their scout was a guy named Marty Blake. And when they got rid of Cleo Hill, HBCU All-American, that Pettit, Cliff Hagan, and Clyde DeVelop said they didn't want to play with, as good as he was, he would have changed their game the way Steph Curry changed the game, because they would have had speed. They didn't want speed. They wanted walkability. When they looked at themselves, do you know by 1964, they had Bill Bridges, Paul Silas, Zelmo Beatty, I think
Lou Hudson?
I'm sorry?
Lou Hudson?
Walt Bellamy?
And no, they had John Barnhill.
Yeah.
And Chico Vaughn from Southern Illinois University. They had put their roster at 5 African Americans, and the people in St. Louis said, we're getting this team out of here. And that's when they sent them down to U Tree and U Timmy. Down there in Southland.
We've been cursed since.
I'm sorry?
We've been cursed since. They ran a graphic last night of the 3 teams that have had the longest drought, have not, to being in the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
1961 for the Atlanta Hawks. Thank you.
Wow. we Ray, this book is really fantastic. The NBA in black and white, the memoir of a trailblazing NBA player and coach. You can get it everywhere. I got mine on Amazon. I actually thought Tim was going to tell you another story about St. Louis.
Oh no!
The great singer Philip Bailey of Earth, Wind and Fire set a YMCA scoring record against Tim.
Sorry. That story is the opposite, Ricky, and stop telling that fib. Philip Bailey knows who I am. He knows what this jumper looks like.
He knows what.
We ran into Earth, Wind and Fire to pick up basketball, and we put Timmy on Philip Bailey, and he gave it a reason. All right.
Well, that was a group too that was promoted by Jim Brown.
Yeah. Jim Brown was
Jim Brown was and what people forget is the people that did Grazing in the Grass.
Friends of Distinction.
Yeah.
That was Jim Brown's group.
Yeah.
That was Jim Brown's group.
All right,
And Jared, my man Jared put up there, Kiefer was too comfortable using that word. Yeah, you're absolutely right. He felt right at home saying that.
Nobody interrupted him.
Well, see, the dude next to him said he said when you're doing that, somebody's in your ear. You're not really listening to what the partner is saying because the guy's expression never changed. I mean, he heard the guy. Oh, it looked like he heard the guy say something, and he just kept on rolling because he had to come back out later and say, "I didn't hear what he said." And to all my black friends, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, you did.
It wasn't like I bought into that.
Yeah.
Tree, final words.
I want to thank Ray for opening Tim's eyes to the legacy of Jim Brown, and he's no longer dead to Tim. And always a pleasure, sir, having you on the show. So thank you again.
Well, I got to defend my friend Tim because I know Tim's heart is good. He's a tough-minded journalist.
He's not wrong now. No, there's nothing that Tim said where he was wrong. No, that's not what Tree and I are saying. We're just extolling the virtues of Jim Brown. But we're certainly not saying he's some perfect human being. He's imperfect. And by his practice, we found, regardless of the role with Raquel Welch in 100 Rifles, that drove white men mad beyond, I was sitting in the movie when that happened. I almost got in a fight in the movie. And when I went to see 100 Rifles, and I went to see the movie with Clint Eastwood and Vanetta McGee, where they climbed the mountain. I can't think of it right now, but they climbed the mountain. But Vanetta McGee and Clint, Eastwood, they had an affair in this movie. And when the same guys that were yelling, I stood up and said, when Clint Eastwood was kissing Vanetta McGee, I said, "Let me hear you yell now."
Yeah.
Love it.
But they were yelling. I mean, they were so. When he was kissing, and Jim Brown was not an actor, so he wasn't, acting. He was Jim Brown,
Kissing.
So when he was kissing her, she said he wasn't trained in Hollywood. He was kissing me.
Hey, Ray. One more thing. When you were, you told me when you were serving as a bodyguard for Coretta Scott King, there were some issues going on, and they called some guys in. Who would go stand with her? You didn't have a gun or anything. You were certainly an imposing figure. Yeah. But the threats were real, and a gun is a gun.
Yeah, I didn't have
What's going through your mind?
There's a picture taken. It's in my book, and I want that picture because I was standing there saying, if something jumps off, I don't even have a gun. So all I can do is throw myself on Mrs. King, but that's I was there because they asked Wes Unseld and they wanted some Bubba Smith. They wanted those guys, but they were playing and Wes was out of the country. And so I wind up going alone. And it's just crowds of people to see Mrs. King. And I'm going like, oh my goodness, I have no training with a weapon. If I had a gun, I wouldn't know which end to shoot, But it was
That's right here.
thought about it. There it is right there.
That's right there. Yeah, but you look mean there, Ray. I don't think nobody's gonna mess with it. Hey, but look, we got to get out of here, man. We've gone over our time. It's just, Ray, it is always an honor and a pleasure when we have you on. Your wisdom is always worth sharing with the world, and this book is just remarkable. I'm going to come by and pick up Tree and Tim's copy real soon. I know.
I'll believe it when I have it in my hands.
Tim is giving me the look. How many times have I heard that?
We have to come and get it. We have to go there and get it, Tim.
For real.
You sure you let me know what you think, guys?
Absolutely.
I'm going to do that in the next couple of days. But thank you so much. Tree, thank you so much. Tim, thank you so much, sir. Thanks to all our viewers out there. And we'll be back next Tuesday. Until then, you've been watching the You Get What You Get. Good night, everybody.
Be kind, everybody.
Peace.